This is the Launch Station, the only place you need to look for all things onboarding, implementation, and customer success. Tune in for insights from industry experts every week.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Launch Station. The topic for today's episode is having a checkbox mentality versus value-focused mentality in the customer success world, on how we need to go beyond the checklists and templates that we create. Our guest for the day is Stephan Howsepian. Stephan comes from a consulting background and is currently senior manager at Citrix, leading a team of CSMs who handle premium customer services for some of the highest profile customers. And he's also in charge of innovations and continuous improvement to their global service delivery. Stephan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Stephan, I'll start with something light and fun. What's one CS lesson you learned from a hobby?
Well, one of my passions is lacrosse. I've been playing for most of my life. I still play. And one of the things that's interesting about delivering success on the lacrosse field is that there's a lot of different roles. There's a lot of different specializations, and successful teams, like the real successful teams, have folks that specialize in each of those different areas. One of the areas that I specialize in is the face-off get-off, or also known as the FOGO, which probably spends the least amount of time on the field, but can be really impactful in both the strategy of the game and also the psychology for your team and the others, because our responsibility is to win the face-off after every quarter or after every score, and that puts the possession back in your team. Now, there may be more glory for an attackman who scores the goal or a defenseman who takes the ball back, but to have the confidence that you'll always get the ball back at the beginning of a possession is pretty impactful. Now, similar, the tie-in to customer success is there's a lot of different teams that are responsible for customer success. There's no one individual who's going to be the one responsible for customer success. And just like on the lacrosse field, we all need to do our part to ensure our customers get the maximum value from the products and services that they've invested in.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting a reference to lacrosse over here. So when we caught up in the past, you spoke about your recommended approach to a customer problem or query. Can you sort of elaborate a little more on that to our audience?
So one of my previous managers once told me, understand before being understood. And I've certainly brought that into the way that I manage my team and coach them on how to manage our customers with regards to our customer success methodology. The reason for this is ultimately each customer is different, each customer is unique. And while we may have a lot of different playbooks or things that we think we can do to add value, every customer has a different set of resources, constraints, and objectives, and the justification for those objectives. So before getting started with introducing ideas and suggestions, we really need to understand where they are today, why they are where they are today, where they're trying to go, why they're trying to get there, because understanding the why between their current state and their desired state will help us cater our recommendations. Once we understand the why, we can take the next step of establishing and executing a plan with them. The challenging part of it is that while customers may have similar goals or come from similar industry verticals, they all have different advantages and challenges they're working through, and therefore there's no common playbook. There's no checklist. There's no guarantee that if you follow these steps, your customer will be successful. And so for those reasons, it's really about adapting a methodology, teaching your customers how to adopt a mentality that enables them to empower themselves to use that methodology, right? A combination of critical thinking, prioritization, and compromise so that they can realize their goals following the path that's going to be unique for their needs and what they have available to them. So if you can train your CSMs on how to think, I think that's more impactful. The other part that I would speak to is just the concept of how we want to help our customers. We don't want to help our customers by creating a dependency on our CSMs. We want to help our customers by empowering them to help themselves, because as we all know, technology is constantly evolving. And if we get comfortable being the subject matter experts on a particular solution or a particular technology, we'll get stuck in the now. But if we can work with our customers and coach them on how to think, how to solve today's problems, then we can teach them to be self-sufficient so that we can go and become subject matter experts on the next problem and then help them with those problems when they're ready to address those problems. So I think, as far as it comes to, thinking different, I think it's really about helping our customers learn and become subject matter experts on what we know, and always staying a step ahead of anticipating what tomorrow's challenges are going to be, so that as we get our customers to be self-sufficient on their current challenges, we're prepared to help them with the challenges that come next.
I guess that makes a lot of sense. This is especially true on the enterprise side, where the uniqueness of each customer's environment further amplifies the need for unique solutions. So do you believe we shouldn't have these templates, task lists, or checklists?
So, templates and task lists, they're great for helping follow process or to set a common format for many of your deliverables. So I think having guidelines is very valuable, right? So long as they're intended to create a framework for methodology. I think where some teams get into trouble is when they think that these, the steps will work in every situation. And really the steps are intended to help our customer success managers understand how to think about customer engagement rather than what to think about customer engagement. The other part is that plans tend to be very dynamic. Sometimes you make progress and then the plan changes. And so, I think we're all very familiar with that this year with 2020 and all the craziness that's happened. So if we get stuck waiting for some compelling event or trying to do something to a certain degree of completion before we can make progress, we'll likely get stuck and our customers will get stuck. But if we can pick and choose portions of the methodology to apply when it makes sense for your customer, then you'll more likely be able to provide a more dynamic and successful solution for your customer. So we really want to make sure that our CSMs understand, why each of those checklists or those checkpoints are important, so that they can, use their discretion to determine which ones should be applied, order they should be applied in, as it depends on where the customer is at in their life cycle and their journey implementing the solution or solving their problems.
Got it. Do you actually have an example that you can share without specifics of company name or details on how this approach has helped you tide over roadblocks you had in the past with customer accounts?
Yeah, back when I was actually with consulting, I was kicking off a project for one of our larger customers, and we were going through the scope document, we were going through the project objectives, and at the tail end of the intro, the customer added a little anecdotal piece of another project that was going on. And when they explained that to me, there was actually technology that would be necessary for that project that could ultimately replace the purpose of the current project. So I asked to better understand their vision, understand their bigger objectives. And once I understood that, I was able to help them understand that the solution that we were looking to implement as part of this technology was actually the legacy solution, and that we could actually design a solution for this project that they could also use for that other desired solution, streamlining their efforts and not requiring them to replace technology on the coattails of introducing it, if that's a good way of explaining it. Again, I can't really speak to too many specific examples, but I think it is important for you to be receptive to where the customer is at in the moment, so and adapting the methodology to either short-term success plans or long-term success plans. Generally, I think the main thing to keep in mind, or the main examples that I've seen is, working with customers. I've seen that as we try to implement our success plans or, our methodology, our customers' receptiveness to that methodology really depends on their readiness. And what I mean by their readiness is some customers, they're really just in a firefighting mode. And so they don't have time to think about success planning or how do I plan for next year or maybe, 3 to 5 years from now. They're just trying to keep themselves afloat. Other customers, they have a lot more stability, and so they're more receptive to these items. So, if we enter a customer and we're really focused on trying to address the long-term plan while the customer's house is on fire, they're not going to be receptive to engaging. But if we enter the customer and really understand, what is your challenges today? What's urgent to you today? Then we can actually add immediate value. And as we drive stability, then we can start opening up the conversations with, more forward-looking planning. But, we need to be able to adjust, the range of our planning and what we're really trying to help our customers achieve based on what's important to them currently.
So we learn about other initiatives, long-term plans, but we also keep in mind the readiness of the company and its ability to focus on the long-term versus short-term. That's definitely something to get alignment on with the project sponsors. Stephan, we're going to shift topics here. When it comes to creating a whole CSM function or a team ground up in a company, do you have a certain formula which you would want to use to build the right team of CSMs? Creating the right structure, hiring the right kind of people, defining a path for them?
Sure. Well, it's a bit of a loaded question because, as I explained at the beginning, it's a team sport. So it really requires a lot of different dynamics as it relates to building a well-rounded team to support our customers. So, focusing more on the post-sales side of customer success, I think there's two skill sets that are very important, right? One is managing the holistic plan, right? Somebody who can come in, onboard effectively, learn the customer's needs, and help structure a plan around that. And then to complement that individual, having subject matter expertise depending on the different solutions you're trying to manage, right? So that can be very dynamic too, whether it's micro interactions or long-term projects. There's just different skill sets, whether it's from a project management perspective, a technical perspective. So, my recommendation is building one team that has the skill set of managing the customer, and one team that has the technical expertise that can be brought in when that project lead or when the customer needs that specialty skill set, more in a project or transactional capacity. So as far as recruiting talent for customer success managers, I may be biased, but I tend to favor folks with consulting backgrounds. And the reason for this is they tend to have more of a balance of soft skills, business acumen, and subject matter expertise. From my experience, a good CSM can speak to any audience, establish command and control in most situations, and does not shy away from rolling up their sleeves when necessary. What I've learned or what I've observed is that if you bring in somebody to this role that is too removed from the technology, they'll have a more difficult time speaking to the solution, bringing in relevant examples, and having relevant experience. And then someone who's on the other side of the spectrum, who's too close to the technology, they may jump in and try to get too deep too quickly before they've had the opportunity to really understand the why of the business objectives or establishing relationships with key contacts that can help them manage obstacles or influence key stakeholders down the path. So having somebody who understands to manage both the business side of the project and the technical side of the project, tends to drive the best success.
Continuing to talk about the role of CSMs and how you hire them, CS is one part. And, there are also other teams touching the customer, right? Professional services, account management, customer support. And I guess the experience of a customer is like the sum of all the experiences that they have interacting with various folks from your organization. So how does CS blend with other teams in a large company like Citrix? And what does it take to create a proper streamlined experience for the customer?
That's a great question, and it's still something that we're mastering, but it's a strong area of focus for us right now. I think the key is really to have a customer success lead who understands all the different teams that can interact with the customer or are interacting with the customer, so that those interactions can be properly orchestrated. With Citrix, we have a number of different professional services from support to consulting to managed service and more. And all those teams work very, very well as an independent professional services team. But as you can probably imagine, when you have these teams working with your customer at the same time, it's important for them to be aware of the different work streams they're each responsible for, milestones, compelling events, change freezes, et cetera, that each require to be successful so that they don't unintentionally step on each other's toes. So as a customer success manager or a customer success lead, it's important to manage, that master plan, if we will, right? Understand how each of those different teams are contributing to the larger goals and communicating the status with the appropriate stakeholders with the customer, so that not only are your teams orchestrated, but your customers' teams are also orchestrated with the larger plan and how all those teams interlock with a common customer journey.
Perfect. It was actually pretty interesting to understand how it all comes together. It makes sense that this would always be something that is a work in progress, and you're getting better at it every day. Can you also share a little bit on how CS evolved in Citrix and the learnings that came along the way? What are some of the most impactful changes that you've made?
We are still in our journey. So we are still learning, but like you said a moment ago, that's, just like we drive our customer journey, we are always in the business of constant improvement. So as it relates to our evolution, I think that we've built a lot of fantastic professional service teams from a lot of different angles, right? So our consulting organization has been around for many, many years and has continued to be a cornerstone of our professional services organization. Our support organization continues to receive awards for their outstanding services. And I think that as we've grown and as more of our enterprise customers have chose to invest and subscribe to our services to help guide them and help support them, customer success grew out of necessity because customers were working with more teams. And those teams, while they have their own objectives, as each customer started subscribing to more of our services, the need to have someone common to all those customers to orchestrate those services, whether they've already subscribed to them, plan to subscribe to them, or may not need them yet, but may choose to subscribe to them in the future. It's important for the customer to constantly have full awareness of what they have available to them to get the full value of that, but also to know how to engage those other teams when it's appropriate. And it's really been great for both the customer and Citrix, because for the customer, they're getting subscribed or recommended the right solution at the right time. Right? They're not getting proposed consulting when they don't need consulting, but when they have a need for consulting or they have a need for premium support services, we can help educate them on what is available should they want to make an investment in those services. And then for Citrix, it's a benefit because when those sales opportunities come forward, we're not trying to sell a customer on something that they may need. We've already qualified that it's something that they do need.
That's wonderful. It's always more pleasant and easy to sell with that context of knowing that the customer actually needs your solution. So now we move to a short, fun segment, a rapid fire segment of the interview. Here's the first one. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say passion?
I would say mentoring. I really enjoy working with people and helping them be successful, helping them learn through their areas for development and sharing with their accomplishments. So that's something that really makes me feel passion.
That's wonderful. What's one book that you would recommend to other CS leaders?
I have been reading a book called Multipliers. It's about different management styles from folks that try to build empires versus folks that try to build people and develop people and encourage their growth. It's really been an interesting read.
Okay. I'm adding Multipliers to my list of books to read. What's one metric that you live by?
So I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to say customer health is really an aggregate of a number of different metrics. I don't think there's one golden metric, but I think that producing a scorecard or that evaluates customer health can be a very impactful way of keeping a measure of your customers.
Got it. That's a very CS answer to give. When I say project go live, what comes to your mind?
I mean, the first thing that I think of whenever we kick off a project is requirements gathering. We have to really understand, what's the project objectives, what's the intended outcome, what are the success measures, and what is the gap that we're ultimately trying to address as part of this project. So you got to start with requirements gathering.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Stephan. We have now come to the last section of our podcast. And these are a few questions coming from our audience on Twitter and from our Rocket Lane Slack community. So here's the first one. What's one piece of advice you would give a CS practitioner who's focused on high profile customers?
So I think that there's a few recommendations there, right? So one is what I said at the beginning, right? Is to understand before being understood. We can't take for granted that a customer is a healthcare customer or a finance customer or a retail customer. Every customer has unique needs, and we really need to start by understanding what are their needs that they're looking to address with your solution. I think another is to build the culture with your team to understand that the plan is the plan until the plan changes. And what that means is that we need to be constantly agile and adapting to how things are evolving, whether it's changes in priorities, changes in what's happening in current events that could impact your customer, and changing the plan up when appropriate. And then I think the last thing is to quote a quote that was shared with me from one of my previous managers was, you don't merely want to be considered the best of the best, but you want to be considered the only one that does what you do. And if you can find a way to be the only one that does what you do, then you have the opportunity to master that skill and continue to experiment. Figure out what is it that you uniquely offer your customers, and do that very well. And don't try to be focused on what other people are delivering. There's definitely lessons learned, but don't try to be the best within the trend. Be the best of what you bring to the customer.
What I liked about that quote was, it probably says, play to your strengths, play your own game. Don't try to play the same game that everyone else is playing.
That's a great way of putting it. I like that.
Awesome. That's a very interesting perspective. What would you say is one important thing to do right at the beginning of a large project that you kick off with an enterprise customer?
So there's a few things that we try to do as part of our standard methodology. The first thing we want to do is internally is we want to understand what we already know about the customer, right? So if we're being brought in as a customer success team, the customer engagement doesn't start at that point. There's a lot of history to how we got to that point. What are the opportunities that the customer or the sales team had been trying to present? We obviously are part of the sales motion that was successful, but there may have been other sales motions that were not successful that had a lot of important information about the customer. So understanding why the customer purchased what they did, to understand why they did not purchase things that they did not purchase, and then also to understand different aspects of the customer, such as who are the primary contacts that we'll be working with, what are their motivators, what is their influence and disposition towards Citrix, and that will enable us to hit the ground running with to be better informed of why we're there, how to engage different customer contacts, so that we can ultimately drive the intended outcome without hitting roadblocks that could be avoided.
Perfect. Here's an interesting question. Given that you handle high profile customers, when you look at these strategic accounts and large customers, do you have a totally different playbook of how to handle them? How's it going to work? Do you actually make it known to these customers that they're part of this set of high profile customers? Do you tell the other customers that they're not part of this and they're getting a different kind of treatment? How do you think about this?
So it's definitely a more of an art than a skill, if you will. So when we look at our portfolio of customers, there's certainly going to be customers of different size. And what's interesting is that as far as the staffing plan, we do need to naturally take into consideration the investment that our customers are making into Citrix, because after all, we are still a business, and our resources have a cost associated with them. So as we build our portfolios and as we assign portfolios of customers to our customer success managers, we do have to take into consideration the investment that each of those individual customers have made into Citrix in order to build out CSM's portfolio. So as we manage our portfolio of customers, there, one of the concepts we discussed a little more recently is the distinction between equality and equity, right? In the reality of delivery of our services, each customer's needs is depends on what they need. Our biggest customers don't always require the highest touch, and by the same experience, our smallest customers don't always require the light touch. They all need support based on what their current needs are. And then from an equity perspective, we really want to find what is the right level of support for customers. And that's not going to be the same year over year. That's not going to be the same even quarter over quarter. Some customers will require high touch at certain times, and then they won't need your help as much. And that can be large customers or small customers, alike. It's really about, identifying a portfolio that has a balance of sizes, right? And then for the CSM to manage their time by identifying who needs what and when they need that help, so that they can either help them themselves or bring in the right resources to help them as they need that extra support. As I said earlier, it's not as simple as applying a algorithm to your customer base. It's about understanding the capacity you have to manage across your customers and applying it based on what customers need and when they need that help.
That's very useful to understand, Stephan. We are nearly at the end of the show. This has been fun as a conversation and a learning experience for me. Anything else you would want to share with CS leaders out there?
I don't know. I mean, I think one of the things that we all take for granted, I think with tenure and with experience, you forget your path, right? You forget how much experience you've learned over time, and we take things for granted that we know. That's one thing that I talk to my TAMs, or I should say we call it, for our specific group, we call them TAMs, but they're customer success managers as well. And one thing I try to remind them, whether it's helping our customers or helping junior members of the team, is, don't take for granted all the experience you've learned, because things that you think at this point in your career as being obvious, or, you just, again, take for granted, it may be something new, or for another member of the team or for the customer to learn from. So that's, having that perspective is always important. And also to remember what the learning curve is like. Again, we take for granted what we know, and it took time, and it took a lot of trials and tribulation in some cases of multiple failures before we learned how to do the things that we do. And now we just do them naturally. So, being able to have the patience for either a mentee or a customer or whatever it might be to go through a similar, journey in their learning path is important.
I think that was a beautiful message, Stephan. I really loved it. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming on our show.
Have a good rest of your weekday.
Thank you.